Hey, St. John, this is Pastor Adam, and I'm sitting down for another one of these interviews, looking at the motion that the council has put before the congregation on November 20th about hiring a school planter slash principal. And I wanted to have this interview with our guest, whose name is Kevin Creutz. He is the education executive for the Ohio District. He's going to be an important voice in this conversation to help give us some broader insight and kind of the next steps of what could be with considering an elementary school. Kevin, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me today.
Awesome. And as you can hear, we have Kevin on the phone. He's a busy guy, and he has to care for Lutheran schools all over the Ohio district. Can you tell us a little bit about your work?
So I've been the education executive in the Ohio District for almost 5 years now, and I have the opportunity to support 57 schools throughout the Ohio District, 57 Lutheran schools. We have 2 high schools in the Cleveland area, 17 elementary schools, and about 38 standalone early childhood programs all throughout Ohio. And the Ohio District supports our schools in a variety of ways through accreditation, professional development of our educators. We provide some advocacy resources down in Columbus at the State House. Recruitment and support of church workers is a big focus for us. And then, of course, just supporting and encouraging any special ministry projects, just like what is happening at St. John right now and the potential of starting an elementary school.
Awesome. So you said 57 schools all across our district, which is the state of Ohio. Are there any in West Virginia, Northern Kentucky? I forget.
So we have one early childhood program in Northern Kentucky. We do not have any schools in West Virginia, but we do have one in Kentucky right over the river. But then the rest are in Ohio.
So you have actually known about this process of what St. John is looking at with this exploratory school committee. We brought you in pretty early on, and you've been actively involved in the committee's work to consider the feasibility of whether St. John could have an elementary school here. And one of the reasons why is you're the education executive, that we'd have to go through you at some point. And I remember, Kevin, I called you on the phone and just kind of had a frank conversation with you of would the district be in support of Lutheran school in the kind of Columbus metro area, and what would your involvement be? I don't know if you had any recollection of that conversation.
I do, and I remember I remember where I was, and I remember being thankful for the phone call and excited because our closest Lutheran elementary school to Columbus is St. John's in Marysville, and with the growth of Columbus and with the number of Lutheran churches we do have there in the area, I think this is a great opportunity. And someone who is in the last 5 years, I'm new to Ohio, and so I'm learning the state. It's always been pretty interesting to me that we don't have an LCMS school in Columbus. So I think this is a really exciting opportunity.
Yeah, because you come from the Indiana district. That's where you were serving prior, and that's a really strong district with Lutheran education. And I definitely echo your sentiment of why isn't there a Lutheran school in the Columbus area? We have them in Cincinnati, we have them in Cleveland, and across the state. But it's just been this weird oddity to me that where's the elementary school in this area? So as the education executive, you have a unique perspective in that you regularly visit our different schools and early childhood centers across the state, and you were the ed exec even through the major events of the pandemic. Being on the other side of that, what would you say is like the status and the position of our Lutheran schools in the Ohio district?
We, I think in a lot of ways, the Lutheran schools are doing very well in the Ohio district. You can just see that in the numbers. We've really maintained about the same number of schools throughout the last few years, and enrollment has stayed steady. And even we're collecting the statistics right now, but we're expecting an increase in enrollment across the district for this school year. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. And I think, God has really blessed our Lutheran schools in a lot of ways. We live in a time right now where I think there's more people, more families that are seeking out other options besides the public school. They may be seeking out another Christian school or a private school or homeschooling or whatever it is, but people are seeking other options. And we have a state that's very favorable to school choice for parents, and so that helps out our schools quite a bit. And then I do see a lot of our churches and schools that are, there's no perfect church and school, but we have a lot of schools that have a good relationship with their congregation and their pastors. We have a lot of administrators in the early childhood programs and in our elementary schools and high schools that are great leaders. We have administrators who are dedicated, committed, are putting in an amazing amount of time and hours to move their ministries forward. So good. We've been really blessed. One of the gifts God has given our district is very good leaders at our schools. So and it helped. You mentioned the pandemic. It helped that we really worked hard to continue learning and instruction when things shut down in the spring of 2020, and teachers were doing Zoom sessions with their students, and they were sending assignments digitally, and they were just continuing to work and doing everything they could to keep learning happening, even though it was everybody was home. And then that next fall of 2020, we opened up, and there were a lot of schools that did not open up at all, or they didn't open up full time, and that made a big difference for our families. And it really wasn't a discussion for our schools. It was, I think a lot of our schools looked at what their mission was and what their purpose was, and it was, we need to educate these children, we need to minister to these families, we need to include religious instruction in our schooling, and we need to do it in person. And it was, we felt like that was our purpose, and it really, I don't think it was a hard decision to open back up. So a lot of factors have gone into where we are today. And another example I can provide is St. John is not the only church that has talked to me about starting a school. I've had quite a few churches that have just inquired or even started the process at mainly looking at preschools. We don't have any other churches that are looking at an elementary school at this point, but we've had a few churches that are looking at a preschool. And so I just think there's a great opportunity, and I think there's a need right now where parents are seeking out other options, and I think that's going to just increase over the next few years.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And I remember hearing some stories from you and from others that, the persistence of our schools to be in person, and this wasn't throwing caution to the winds or ignoring safety practices, those were certainly in place, but there was just an increased focus to have our children in person and to continue the work that Lutheran schools do. And I guess maybe to step back a little bit, because you're focused here as the ed exec of the Ohio district, but you come from a long line in history in the Lutheran Church that we give a great deal of focus and energy towards schools, and how schools are very much part of our identity. I know a pastor on the other side of the country who will often say the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod is schools. It makes me chuckle whenever he says that, but I think there's a great deal of truth to it. Could you maybe share with St. John a little bit about some of that history and identity we have in Lutheran schooling?
Education and the establishment or starting schools that were a part of the church's ministry or sponsored by the church has been around since the LCMS began. And we know that this year we're celebrating the 175th anniversary of the LCMS. And so from the very beginning, that has been a part of our identity, and that has been important. And, from the Lutherans have made it a priority to include religious instruction into education. They have always felt that was very important. There's a lot of Lutheran schools that are 175 years old, like the Synod. That go back all the way to before the Civil War. One of the very first Lutheran schools in the country was actually St. John's, Marysville, and we have continued that focus and that priority for decades and decades. And so even today, we have so many churches that continue to put a strong focus on education. And we have about 2,000 schools throughout the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod throughout the United States. We are the second largest Christian school organization behind the Catholic school system. We're the largest Protestant school system in the country. We have, thousands of teachers teaching every day, and we have, hundreds of thousands of students that are in our Lutheran schools, and they're hearing God's word each and every day, and they're hearing God's promises for them, and they're hearing about the death and resurrection of their Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And so it really is an amazing ministry, and I try to communicate all the time. Take a look at the opportunity you have when you have students in your building all day, every day for 9 months, and it's an awesome ministry. And we estimate that in Ohio districts that we have over 5,000 students, and we estimate about 1,000 of those students do not have a church home. So they're not connected to a church. They're not worshiping regularly on Sunday morning anywhere. And here we have this opportunity for those students and all students to be in God's Word and to share the love of Jesus with them each and every day. So it's a great benefit to be a Lutheran school too, just because you're a part of that system, and it can start in early childhood, and you've seen that at St. John. You have a great early childhood program, and it continues into our Lutheran elementary schools, and then it continues for a lot of our students into a Lutheran high school, and then it can continue into a Lutheran university, and then we have the Lutheran seminaries. So it doesn't just stop in 8th grade either. There are opportunities for our children and our young adults to continue learning in a Lutheran school. So it's there's a lot of great support and resources that are available to schools just because you're a part of this great Lutheran system.
I think that's something that's helpful to remember, is that, regardless of how St. John proceeds on this matter, if we go ahead with looking towards an elementary school, or we continue with our early childhood center, we're not alone in this endeavor, that there is a large network and focus on the mission of these schools and just a history and experience. And you mentioned just the whole system. I'm certainly a product of that, from 4-year-old preschool all the way through seminary. Every year of my education was in one of our Lutheran schools. And it's certainly a blessing to be a part of that. And it has formed me and shaped me in so many ways. That's a big reason why we continue to look for ways to have schools in our synod. I think one thing you mentioned was just how in the history of the Missouri Synod that schools have a just as long of a history as our congregations, and I think there are even examples of schools that were founded before the congregation. When we were in St. Louis, Rachel was teaching at a school, a Child of God, out in St. Peters, Missouri. They were a school plant, and then they eventually formed a congregation. And I know it's not an uncommon thing either, but this is just part of our identities, that we raise our children in the faith, and we see schools as a primary way to do that.
Right. Yeah. The elementary school that I went to as a child was over 100 years old, and it was the same thing. It was the school was started first, and then the church followed. So that happened in the 1880s or whenever it happened. And then there are examples like Child of God, which that was probably 20 years ago when that school was up and running. So it just continues to be a priority for the LCMS. And we continue to see these schools be a blessing for the families.
Well, like I said, we brought you in pretty early on into the committee's work to explore the feasibility, and it's because you are the ed exec and you bring that district perspective, but you also helped provide answers and direction for, some of the questions and challenges that come up. And a big piece, of course, with any Lutheran school is going to be the finances of it. And maybe if I can speak a little further on this, congregations, over the years and decades have varied in how they fund their schools. There are even congregations, historically that would pay, all the tuition or half the tuition. And, you hear stories of 60, 70, 80% of the offerings on Sunday going towards the school. I think it's fair to say that today that can't be the reality in terms of funding a school. And so how does a school get funded today? Can you share a little more about that?
Sure. There continues to be a shift in that, in how schools are funded, and you're correct. I mean, there was a long history where the schools were financially supported by the church, and there was a day and age when there was not even tuition, and there might have been a small fee or something, but the churches really were able to support the schools almost 100% financially. That really has shifted, and we now are in a time and a place where the funding from the churches is much less, and schools have been moving more and more to a model where they are completely self-funded or almost self-funded, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, there's more of a gap now because of the rising costs of education. The cost to educate a child it continues to go up and up, and then some of the resources that the churches have may diminish as well. So there's that gap there. So a lot of our schools have worked towards really trying to be able to provide the funding without as much support from the church. So most of the funding for schools comes through tuition, and I couldn't give you an exact percentage, but it'll vary from school to school, but that is definitely the biggest percentage. And then the other areas where besides tuition would be some church support. And then another area is what we would call third source funding. And so this would be fundraising projects, grants, things like that, to just help fill the gaps. So one of the things you'll see though with a school that's owned by a single church, like at St. John, is even if there's not a lot of dollars that are being put into the school budget from the church, there's a lot of other ways that you can support the school. The time that maybe the church staff, like a pastor or a deaconess or a music director, so some of the time they can provide to the school is one way that the church can support the school. And then with facilities, there's a lot of shared facilities. So maybe the church would take care of any kind of repairs or utilities and things like that. So, but this does lend itself to the discussion about finances in Ohio. And again, we are just blessed in Ohio to be an ed choice state. And so we have so many, with these schools relying on tuition dollars for their finances, for their budgets. We are just blessed that there are so many students in Ohio that qualify for an ed choice scholarship, and they have a $5,500 scholarship to attend the school of their choice. And if you're an ed choice provider, then a lot of your students may have the opportunity to have over $5,000 scholarship that can be applied to their tuition. So it's one way that Ohio is just, it's a very friendly state for non-public schools because of the funding and the opportunities that schools have with EdChoice and some of the other funding mechanisms.
Yeah, you bring up how Ohio can be a favorable state, and that's something that stuck out to me coming from Michigan. From my experience, not as favorable a state in supporting private education. And Ohio has, you mentioned the EdChoice, and there are other sources of funding and laws in place to benefit schools like a Lutheran school. And I think you also, on behalf of the district and just kind of like was like a Lutheran school like network, don't you like help with some like lobbying efforts down at the State House, or how does that all work?
Yes, so that's one of the services we provide. So we actually have a contract with a lobbyist in Columbus, and this is a partnership between the Ohio District and the Cleveland Lutheran High School Association. We partner together with this contract, and this lobbyist he advocates on behalf of the Lutheran schools. And so one of the great things about this lobbyist is he works for now our priorities down in Columbus. Most of them align with other Christian schools throughout the state, but we have, as a Lutheran school system, we have our own lobbyist, and so he advocates on behalf specifically of Lutheran schools, and he's very good at what he does, and he's supportive of our priorities, and he strongly believes in the ministry of our schools, and he does a great job. The other support we have is our Lutheran schools are part of something called the Ohio Christian Education Network, and this is an organization that was formed to create a network for all Christian schools in Ohio, and they provide resources and support to our schools. They provide some professional development, and they also do provide some advocacy at the State House. So it's a great support for our schools. I mean, we always encourage our principals and teachers to be involved in advocacy, but at the same time, they still are able to focus on what they need to do within their own buildings, because we have some of these resources doing a lot of legwork down in Columbus for our schools. So I think if you talk to any other Lutheran school or any other administrator, they would tell you they're grateful for both the lobbyists and for the Ohio Christian Education Network and what they provide.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good reason of some folks may wonder, why have an Ohio district? Why have a Missouri Synod? I mean, the Ohio district exists to support the congregations of the district. And I like how you said that, our teachers and principals can focus on caring for their schools, and the district can act on their behalf to benefit them. And that's why we have an EdExec. That's why we have our district, is to support the local work of our local congregations.
Right.
Well, Kevin, I think we're nearing the end of our time, but I have just a couple of questions left for you. And the first is, you've been a part of the ad hoc committee that was looking at the feasibility of having an elementary school at St. John and made its recommendation to the council. And now that there's a motion before the congregation of St. John, from your position and place in the matter as someone who's not part of our congregation, but on behalf of the district, what would be your recommendation for the members of St. John as they prayerfully consider this motion?
Well, I would certainly recommend that you continue moving forward and exploring this possible opportunity that God may be leading you to. And there's a couple reasons why. First of all, we can share God's word and the gospel of Jesus Christ in our Lutheran schools. And this should always be the main purpose of the Lutheran school. And that has always been a focus of this exploratory committee. I am so appreciative that has always been the main focus in the meetings and the studies that have been done over the last year and a half. That is why Lutheran schools, that is the main reason why Lutheran schools exist. So that's one great opportunity. Another reason I think you should continue exploring this is I think this is the right time for churches to consider opening a Lutheran school. I do think that more and more parents each year are going to be looking for an alternative, and because of that, I think this is a really good time to explore the possibility of opening a school. And the third thing is, I really think St. John has a lot of great things in place already. You're being located in Ohio is a plus, and There's a lot of benefits to being a private school in Ohio. You already have a facility that could house the startup of a Lutheran school. You have a strong tradition of education already, both in your church and with your early childhood program. So you already have that feeder in place for an elementary school, and you've already done education very well in that early childhood program. And then I look at a lot of support from pastor to church staff to school staff to lay leadership to this committee. You have a lot of people in place that are already supporting this. So I haven't seen a major roadblock come up yet, and I really think there's a lot of great potential and a lot of great reasons to start up a Lutheran elementary school at St. John. So my recommendation and encouragement to the congregation is to continue moving forward and continue to seriously explore this possibility.
Well, thank you for that, Kevin. Let's say, I know this might be getting a little ahead of ourselves, but I think it might be helpful for our folks listening in. Let's say we were to continue on, as you said, and the motion were to pass. Looking ahead to, the task of starting up an elementary school, how would you, the ed exec, be involved in those steps?
There's a few things that I would do, and there's, a few things I can do. Number one, I am here to help provide any resources necessary. And if I don't have the resource or if I don't have the answer, I will connect you to a resource, or I will connect you to a person who can help you. Number two, I'm very involved when schools are in the call process especially for an administrator. So as you look at the possibility of bringing in an administrator to help start up this program, I can help recruit and bring names to the committee to consider. Can be a part of the interview process and onboarding for that new person. And another thing I can do is I can be a liaison between St. John and the Ohio Department of Education. So in order to get your chartered non-public school status, that'll something that I will definitely want to be involved in and need to be involved in to make sure that process goes smoothly and you can officially become a chartered non-public school. So basically here to do whatever I can to support, provide resources, and assist you with whatever you need to get things up and running.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for taking time today to be interviewed and to give some more perspective and insights of the larger work of the district, the status of our Lutheran schools in the state, and I'd ask you to just keep this whole process in your prayers as St. John considers what to do next.
I will definitely be doing that. I will be keeping the entire ministry in my prayers, and I would encourage the congregation to continue to be in the Word and to be in prayer as well as you consider this opportunity.
All right. Well, thanks, Kevin, and you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
All right.